know you gotta pack up your tent and ride. Pack up your tent and ride. Good grub cooking on a fire tonight. Pack up your tent and ride.
Hi, I'm Fraser Douglas, and I've been an avid tent camper now for over 55 years. In this video, I want to compare 3 small hatchets that are frequently purchased by family tent campers and used on their camping trips. The Estwing Campers Axe 14, the Fiskers X7, and a reasonably priced wood handle axe. I hope you'll find something of value in this video. Before comparing these 3 axes, I want to first review some important background information. First of all, any axe can split firewood. Splitting mauls were made to split large tree rounds. Hewing axes were made to square off the sides of round logs. And tactical axes are made for fighting and self-defense. Now, all of these axes could be used for family tent camping chores, but a few of them will do the job a lot safer and a lot easier than all the others. So an important question is, which axe is best suited for families who typically camp in developed public campgrounds? Before we can identify the best axe for family camping, we must first define the task we want it to perform. The primary task of a camp axe for most camping families is splitting firewood that typically measures about 16 inches long by 6 inches in diameter into smaller pieces of stove wood and kindling. A second task is to make small items such as splitting wedges, axe handles, tent pegs, and walking sticks. Typically, family campers would not use a camp axe to cut down a tree or to buck a fallen tree into logs. Instead, they would use their folding saw. So, in my opinion, the safest and most efficient axe for performing these common family camping chores is a small boy's axe with a 1.5 pound to 2.25 pound Dayton-shaped head hung on a 20 to 25 inch handle. But many families do not want to pack this larger axe, and they prefer a smaller hatchet with about a 14-inch handle. So I decided to compare 3 very popular small hatchets. Now, let me discuss centerline geometry because it plays an important role in determining how these 3 axes will act when they're splitting firewood. Most small hatchets have a concave curvature along this centerline to reduce the head weight, and this concave curvature is good for splitting firewood. But splitting mauls and a few small hatchets have a flat or convex curvature along this center line to keep the head from sticking in large tree rounds. In addition, you should notice the curvature across the center line. Most American-made hatchets have a convex curvature across this center line, where the center line is high, but the top edge and the bottom edge are much lower. This convex curvature, frequently called tapered cheeks, presumably helps to keep the axe from sticking in the firewood, but I want my axe to stick in the firewood. Furthermore, I have discovered that the elevated centerline and tapered cheeks pushes the firewood down toward the handle where it will cause more overstrike damage. And so I prefer a European-made hatchet, which typically is flat across that center line. Now let me say, many different types of wood is sold as firewood. Some of this wood is very easy to split, while other wood is extremely difficult to split. For example, southern white pine is extremely easy to split. You could easily split it with any axe, but it makes a very poor firewood. So when you see someone on a video easily splitting a piece of wood with an axe, it does not necessarily mean that that's a good axe. Oak and hickory is relatively easy to split and makes a much better firewood, while elm and sweet gum are extremely difficult to split. Furthermore, pieces of firewood with knots, crotches, or twisted grain are much more difficult to split than pieces of firewood with straight grain. Most other firewood that you will find will be moderately difficult to split. Now let me demonstrate what I believe is the safest and easiest way to split firewood. To split large pieces of firewood, I usually start with the upside down method. First, I stick my axe in the top of the firewood, then I turn it upside down and drop it on my splitting block. To split firewood with knots or twisted grain, I start a crack with the upside down method, and then I finish the split with plastic felling wedges. To split smaller pieces of wood, I use the side splitting method. And when I need small kindling, I'll just cut chips of wood off of the bottom of a small piece of firewood. Now let me compare the Estwing Campers Axe 14 with the Fiskers X7 and a wood handle axe. I'll start by discussing the wood handle axe first. Although some of the top name wood handle axes cost up to $200, you can still find some reasonably good wood handle axes for less than $50. For example, Estwing makes one for around $40. For this video, I'll be using an old Collins axe head that I rehung on a new 14-inch handle. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many other axe authorities, a wood handle axe is more comfortable than either the Fiskers or the Estwing axe. If you have to split a lot of firewood, your hand and wrist is much less likely to become tired and cramped if you use the wood handle axe. However, wood handle axes have several limitations that need to be considered. First of all, if it has not been hung properly, the steel head of a wood-handled axe can fly off of the handle when you're splitting firewood and injure a nearby person. Second, a wood handle can easily slip out of your hand, especially when you're sweating, and the axe can fly back to hurt you or someone else. To prevent the small hatchet from slipping out of my hand, I always add a lanyard and use it when splitting firewood. Third, wood handles are easily damaged by accidental overstrikes, and if you have several overstrikes, you may have to replace the axe handle after a few uses. The area most likely to be damaged by overstrikes is the part of the handle between the bottom of the axe eye and the bottom of the axe heel. I call this area the overstrike zone. And I cover this overstrike zone with a leather guard. Fourth, the head of most wood-shafted axes is only hardened about 2 inches back from the bit. Thus, the pole of the axe should never be used as a hammer or hit by a hammer. And finally, wood handles will have to be replaced every 5 to 10 years because they become dry, rotted, and damaged by insects over time. Compared with a wood-shafted axe, the Estwing Campers Axe 14 has several advantages. For example, the head and the shaft are one piece and will never separate. Second, the steel shaft will never incur overstrike damage or rot, and thus will never come loose to injure a person or have to be replaced. Third, the head is completely hardened, so it can be used as a hammer to drive in steel tent stakes. Fourth, the rubberized handle with a gradual swell is less likely to slip from your hand, and it has a lanyard hole if you want to add one. Fifth, the head has a small notch that may help you pull out your tent stakes. And lastly, the centerline geometry is perfect for my splitting methods. The axe head easily sticks into the end of the firewood so that I can use the upside down method. Unfortunately, the Estwing also has some disadvantages which need to be considered. First, it is heavier than the other two axes, which can lead to earlier fatigue when splitting several pieces of firewood. Second, most of the weight is in the handle rather than in the head, so that the balance is thrown off and more downward effort is required to split the firewood. And third, the steel shaft does not flex and thus produces more vibration each strike. Now let me describe the Fiskers X7 hatchet. It has a fiberglass and plastic handle that is molded around the head and is frequently described as indestructible. Because of this construction, the axe head will not separate from the handle, and the handle will not incur overstrike damage or ever have to be replaced. Although the plastic handle can get slippery, it has a large pommel quillen that will keep the axe from slipping out of your hand most of the time. The pole on the back of the head is hard enough to be used as a hammer, but the plastic wrap around the head makes it hard to use the side of the head for driving in metal tent stakes. Now the Fiskers, like most other axes, will easily split through a small piece of dry firewood with a straight grain. But because of its wide head and flat centerline, it has more difficulty starting a crack in firewood with knots or twisted grain. More importantly, the Fiskers hatchet produces an unpleasant vibration every time I strike a piece of wood, and it makes my hand and forearm numb after splitting several pieces of wood. In conclusion, you can find outdoor enthusiasts on YouTube who prefer each of these three axes, and they give good reasons, but I personally prefer the Estwing for my tool bag. Before concluding, I want to remind you that any of these short-handled small hatchets is more dangerous than a small boy's axe. If you try to split a piece of firewood on the ground and miss, the momentum of the axe can easily bring it back to cut your leg. So, safety experts recommend that you always kneel when splitting firewood with a small hatchet. For more information about camp axes and other family camping gear, please visit my website, moderntentcamping.com. A link is provided in the description below. And while you're there, check out the Amazon page for some links to great family camping equipment.
Take more trips, travel further, visit more attractions, and spend less money. Go tent camping. Thanks for watching.